Okay, folks, so what I'm doing here is going to show you guys blend modes. Now, I have a sample image. This is one of the two sample images that I've given you guys up on Brightspace. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, I've just turned off this layer. So this is why it probably looks a little bit different from what you opened right away. So turn that off. And I'm just going to go through blend modes and kind of show you how it works. So blend modes will alter a selected layer and allow certain information in the tonal range and color range to either be hidden or be combined or ultimately hidden or shown so that you can have a specific effect on your image. So for this layer, if I open up my blend modes, and you can find it right here in the layer panel, usually you'll say normal. Remember that these are split into groups. So we have the darken group. So right now, this layer is going to mix with the layer below it. So you're going to see darken, multiply, color burn. So what it's doing is just darkening down certain areas of one layer and mixing with the other. So depending on the effect and depending on the range. So multiply and darken will just darken. Color burn will darken in a stronger way, but it'll also apply different aspects of color when it's doing its thing. We have the lighten group, which does the same idea, so it's just going to lighten. And then we have our overlay group, which is used more for compositing, but it does have an interesting effect depending on how you use it. We have difference, exclusion, subtract, divide, the subtraction zone, and this is useful for certain aspects in Photoshop ultimately. And then we have the tonal and color specific groups. Now practically for you guys, if we want to do something interesting like a double exposure in Photoshop, this is where the snake layer comes in. What we're going to do is just change the blend mode of snake, so it'll blend with the layers below it. So I'm going to go down to overlay. Now if you've ever seen a quote double exposure, this is kind of how they do it. Now this is applying only to the portrait for two reasons. The background is pretty much pure white, so it's not going to really affect that. And I do have it masked at the same time, so there you go. That's why it's applying to that mask. So that is how we can mess around with the blend mode for doing a double exposure. Now, of course, we can do certain things like move the layer above if we want to, or we can duplicate it and free transform it. Let me just zoom out here. Let's rotate it like this and do something like that. So we can do a bunch of different things, and then we can lower our layer opacity to do any kind of texture we want within an image itself. We can, of course, mask after that if we want to. So, for example, if I don't want this built up on my subject's eyes, let's go with a 50% brush. And we'll go with a concealing brush. There we go. I'll have to do the same for both layers. Cool. So we can do something like that if we wanted to. Now, another blend mode we can use is something called color. So this is the second layer. And we have a layer already created for you guys called color. So if I wanted to, say, create a color, so let's go 10, 30, 40. So this is basically just the CMYK value for, air quotes, perfect Caucasian skin. Now, again, this won't look realistic because nobody has those exact numbers all over, but if I start painting over the person's skin, now my brush opacity is low, you're going to see that it's just a solid mass. This is where blend modes are going to come in. If I change my blend mode on this color layer to color, which is at the bottom, you'll see what will happen is it's going to allow the tonality to come through the layer. Now you also notice that if I paint on the background, because there's no information, it will not blend through. So there you go. This is how blend modes work. This allows us to, change the color of something if we want to, or do something creative. Now, once upon a time with blend modes, you used to have to use blend modes to do a lot of the functions you actually do in Photoshop. So if I wanted to lighten an image, I'd have to use a blend mode. If I wanted to darken an image, so on and so forth. So there wasn't a lot of flexibility in Photoshop once upon a time. Now, the benefit of Photoshop evolving over time is now these features are, evolving into different things. So we use curves and whatnot and adjustment layers. Now, I still use blend modes. I use blend modes for this exact function that I'm doing right now, depending on what I'm doing. But the one I use the most is luminosity, as it will only affect tone. Okay, and to give you an example of that, if I add an adjustment layer, and I do something very drastic, so let's just get rid of that. And there we go. You'll see that it's affecting the color of her skin. She now looks like a very orange color. If I change its blend mode to luminosity, it will just affect the tone and not so much the color. So if I just step back and move forward, so I'm just changing my blend mode back to normal and back to luminosity. This is the one I use the most. So if you guys want to make an adjustment layer that is quite strong in terms of contrast and you find it doing weird things with your color, you guys can use luminosity. So there you go, folks. That is how we use blend modes and some creative things you guys can use blend modes for.